President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez, announced a systematic robbery of the Venezuelan people by extremist sectors of the opposition led by Juan Guaido. After 9 rounds of voting since Tuesday, members of Chile's Constitutional Convention finally elected a new president of the body, tasked with rewriting the dictatorship-era constitution. Protesters stormed public buildings in Kazakhstan's biggest city on Wednesday as security forces struggled to impose control after the government resigned in response to anger over a fuel price increase. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the south. I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Venezuela, where the President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced a systematic robbery of the Venezuelan people by extremist sectors of the opposition led by Juan Guaido. As part of the election and installation of the new board of directors of the National Assembly this Wednesday, Rodriguez ordered the special commission led by lawmaker José Brito to investigate in depth the illegal seizure of Venezuelan assets with the support of the US sanctions carried out in the past few days. Rodriguez also pointed out that around $382 million was stolen between 2020 and 2021 by Guaido and his supporters. Allegedly, several countries donated around $800 million in humanitarian aid to these sectors, and yet the Venezuelan government has not had access to a single cent. And the President of the Venezuelan Parliament stressed that prior to the election of the current National Assembly, far-right lawmakers used Parliament as a space to plot against national interests.
Because of brutal theft, because of calls for a military invasion of Venezuela, because of alliances with international criminal sectors, the alliances with Colombian drug trafficking, with Colombian paramilitaries, the signing of contracts with the United States, Canadian and Colombian mercenaries to promote an armed invasion of our coasts. All moves that can be considered part of a terrible nightmare were instigated by those who from this same space attempted to cause destruction.
The head of the Venezuelan parliament also ordered a special commission in charge of investigating the crimes committed by the past opposition leadership of the National Assembly to incorporate the crimes of theft of assets belonging to the Venezuelan people.
Today, before the people of Venezuela, I ordered this special commission, coordinated by lawmaker José Brito, to include, within 7 days' time, the crimes that were committed 2 days ago and to which the perpetrators themselves confessed. Because if one meets with other accomplices to the theft and says, 20 million for you, 8 million for you, 300 million for you, they are committing the crime of theft and above, and even more serious itself, theft from the people of Venezuela. Enough is enough. They must face justice.
Rodriguez also conditioned the return to talks with the opposition on the return of the state assets stolen from the country.
You want dialogue? Stop stealing money that does not belong to you and give back to the people of Venezuela the money that you stole, the assets that you are stealing, the gold held in England. Citgo, if you want talks, admit that you made a serious mistake and committed crimes against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. There is no dialogue with hypocrisy.
Lawmaker for the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, underlined the efforts of the National Assembly over the past year since taking over from the corrupt former opposition-led parliament.
I congratulate you all for the extraordinary work you have been doing over the past year. We emerged from the disaster, from the most evil betrayal of the homeland. From 5 years of darkness and evil at the National Assembly, the election came in which we were elected. We, men and women, you were all elected and the stability commenced.
Colombia is experiencing a wave of violence as a result of armed conflict in departments such as Arauca, where more than 20 people were killed last weekend. Our correspondent Hannah Tobar has the details.
These images show how far conflicts have taken hold on the department of Arauca, where on January 2nd several massacres were reported, leaving 20 people murdered in municipalities such as Tamen, Fortul, Saravena, and Arauquita. Representatives of social organizations in this region denounce how triggering interests go beyond territorial disputes or drug trafficking caused by the armed groups. The Department of Arauca is important for the Colombian oligarchy and the imperial forces because of the plundering of natural resources related to oil. It is also one of the most extensive borders with the sister Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. It is a territory of great biodiversity and water wealth, and it is a part of what was called the Dry Channel that will unite Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela for those potentials of the FTAA and others.
Según las
According to
mismas
the social
organizaciones
and human
sociales y
rights
derechos
organizations
humanos,
in the
en la
region,
región los diversos
different
intereses han
interests
generado una
have generated a
disputa por el
dispute
control de
for
estos
the control
recursos.
of these
Por una parte,
resources.
está la
On
presencia
the
del
one hand,
ELN
there is
desde
the presence of the
1980.
ELN
Después
since
de la firma de los
1980.
acuerdos de paz,
After the signing
algunos
of the
territorios
peace
han
agreement,
sido ocupados por
some
las
territories
disidencias
have
de
been
las
taken
FARC
over
y
by the
algunos
FARC
grupos
dissident
paramilitares.
and paramilitary
Disputa
groups,
en la que
a
en medio
dispute
queda la
in which
población
civilian
civil y rural.
and rural
Una zona de
population
conflicto
are in the
también
middle,
que está
a
asociada a los
conflict zone
intereses del
also
gobierno
associated
de Estados
with
Unidos
the
contra
interests of the
Venezuela
U.S.
por ser
government
una zona de
against
frontera.
Venezuela because it is a border zone. To serve as a spearhead for those imperial moves to intervene militarily there, and all that has been said about overthrowing the Bolivarian government, because it is also sometimes mentioned the issue of the alleged drug trafficking route, but the two rebel organizations have denied that this has anything to do with them and use it for those purposes. Just as we say this border as the oligarchy of the state say because for us, as a people the Arauca River does not separate us, but unite us. As usual, after the act of violence in the country, a Security Council was held with the presence of all the authorities of the Department of Arauca, where it was assured that 50 of the 23 victims have already been identified, 4 of whom were Venezuelan citizens. Officially, the preliminary version is maintained that these murders are the result of a confrontation between the ELN and dissident over territorial dispute in Venezuela that end in Colombia. The fact that happens on the other side of the border in Venezuela territory due to dispute over criminal income has generated the effects that we see today, and that once again as a consequence show how criminal acts are committed on the other side of the border to then affect the life and tranquility of Colombians on this side of Arauca. For the time being, a reward was ordered against members of the groups operating in the area, and an increase in the force with the transfers of 2 military battalions, and in the long term, the installation of the new military facilities. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of Arauca held sit-ins and march request respectful life and congressmen request humanitarian actions and an integral president of the state. He also called for humanitarian actions to support the mediation of the Catholic Church with on-the-ground action by the Ombudsman Office and hopefully the International Red Cross and the United Nations system. The Senate Peace Commission is obligated to join these efforts. In parallel to this event, a new massacre was reported in the department of Valle del Cauca, with 3 Venezuelan nationals who were engaged in construction work were murdered, according to the information from the authorities. This murder took place in the township of San Antonio, municipality of Jamundí.
Hernán Darío Tobar, teleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. After 9 rounds of voting since Tuesday, members of Chile's Constitutional Convention finally elected a new president of the body tasked with rewriting the dictatorship-era constitution. Voting resumed Wednesday after 8 rounds and more than 15 hours of debate on Tuesday saw no candidate secure the 78 votes necessary to preside over the convention. In a 9th round, the 155-member organisation elected Maria Elisa Quinteros as its president on Wednesday. A dentist by profession, 39-year-old Quinteros is a researcher at the Public Health Department of the University of Talca and an environmental activist. She will lead the convention ahead of a crucial July 5th deadline to conclude work on the new constitution, which will be put to a referendum later this year. In the United States, a Miami court charged a Colombian man with participating in a plot to kidnap or kill Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. In a statement released on Tuesday, the U.S. Department of Justice said Mario Antonio Palacios, age 43, had been charged with conspiracy to commit murder or kidnapping outside the U.S. He was also charged with providing material support resulting in death, knowing or intending that such material support would be used to prepare for or carry out the conspiracy to kill or kidnap. The department has alleged that Palacios and others, including approximately 20 other Colombian nationals and a group of Haitian American citizens based in Haiti, participated in the plot to kill the president. Haitian authorities have said that Palacios, a former member of the Colombian military, was part of a mercenary group that killed Moise in July. And former Haitian Prime Minister Claude Joseph assured that the investigation into the assassination of President Jovenel Moise is advancing in the right direction, following the arrest of a key suspect by the United States. Joseph called on the U.S. authorities to consider the possible extradition of Mario Antonio Palacios to Haiti after an initial extradition request was sent to Jamaica, where he'd been detained since October when he illegally entered the country. Palacios was detained by Panamanian authorities on Monday on a stopover as he was being deported to Colombia at the request of the United States. French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday faced anger from opponents and chaos in Parliament after warning French people not yet vaccinated against COVID-19 that they would be squeezed out of key aspects of social life. Macron, who has not yet formally declared his candidacy for re-election in April, came under fire from challengers already in the race, accusing him of overstepping the line with his remarks after he said he really wanted to piss off the unvaccinated. The uproar prompted a new delay to legislation aimed at tightening France's COVID rules at a time when the country is facing record daily infection rates fueled by the Omicron strain of the virus. According to government figures, 91% of French over 18s are fully vaccinated. In the meantime, Wednesday saw a new daily record number of people getting vaccinated, the highest figure since October 1st, suggesting the threat of new restrictions could be having an impact. The Brazilian city of Rio de Janeiro has cancelled street parties during its world-famous carnival for a second year due to an increase in COVID-19 cases and the threat posed by the arrival of the Omicron variant. According to the city's mayor, the parade by Rio's samba schools will go ahead, with measures in place to prevent the spread of the virus. After meeting with health authorities, the official also announced that the city would call off the street events that draw hundreds of thousands of carnival enthusiasts every year. So other Brazilian cities, such as Belo Horizonte and Sao Paulo, are also cancelling their carnival parades. Cases of COVID-19 are on the rise again in Brazil. The health ministry reported nearly 19,000 new cases on Tuesday and more than 100 COVID-19 related deaths. Peru's Minister of Health confirmed that the country is already in a third wave of COVID infections as the Omicron variant spreads rapidly. During a press conference of the Special COVID-19 Commission, Health Minister Hernando Ceballos confirmed that Omicron has become the predominant variant of the virus in Lima, the country's capital, representing more than 53% of reported cases. The minister also highlighted that cases increased by more than 50% on a national scale over the past few weeks.
We want to announce tonight the report. This is the situation or diagnosis that deserves the beginning of the third wave in our country, that we have been pointing out for a long time, with the increase of cases. And because this presence of the third wave is part of an international phenomenon, we have already seen different countries in the world that have substantial increase of COVID cases. Even more so now with the presence of the Omicron variant, which has a much higher reproductive and contagious capacity than the variants we have known so far. During the month of December, comparing weeks 49 and 52, the cases of COVID-19 doubled in metropolitan area of Lima and increased by more than 50% at the national level.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Protesters stormed public buildings in Kazakhstan's biggest city on Wednesday as security forces struggled to impose control after the government resigned in response to anger over a fuel price increase. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev on Wednesday instructed to impose state regulation on fuel prices for 6 months in a bid to quell the protests. In addition, a moratorium on raising utility rates was ordered, as well as rent subsidies for the most vulnerable population. The prices of socially important foodstuffs will also be brought under state control, depending on the needs of each region, as the authorities seek to address the socio-economic situation fueling public discontent. And Russia has reacted to the ongoing unrest in Kazakhstan, warning against any foreign interference in the internal affairs of the Central Asian nation. On Wednesday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Kazakhstan could solve its own problems, and it was important that no one interfered from the outside. He also urged dialogue in the country as unprecedented unrest spun out of control over a fuel price increase. In addition, Russia's foreign ministry said in a statement it was closely monitoring the situation in its southern neighbour and counting on the soonest possible normalisation of the situation. And the United Nations called on both political leaders and opponents in Kazakhstan to exercise restraint amid rising tensions and protests in the country. Spokesman Stefan Dujarric said that the UN was monitoring the situation closely. Although the protests began over a near doubling of prices for a type of liquefied gas that's widely used as vehicle fuel, the size and rapid spread of the unrest suggests they reflect wider discontent in the former Soviet country.
Obviously, following with concern and monitoring the situation in Kazakhstan. I think it's very important for all involved in these current events to exercise restraint, refrain from violence, and promote dialogue in addressing all of the pertinent issues.
Nigerian security forces rescued nearly 100 kidnapped victims held in forest hideouts in the country's northwest after they were kidnapped at least 2 months ago by criminal gangs, according to police. Nigeria's police and army have been cracking down on heavily armed groups, known locally as bandits, in recent months, who target villages and communities, mostly in central and northwestern states, for looting raids and mass abductions for ransom. In one operation on Monday, police rescued 68 victims held in camps in an area of Zamfara state with the help of former bandits turned informants. Those victims, including men, women and children, have been held for more than 3 months, Zamfara police said. In a separate operation, police freed another 29 victims from the Kunchin Kalgo forest in the same state, where they were held for 60 days. The first edition of the Jordan Trade and Services Fair started in the Syrian capital Damascus on Tuesday and will run for 3 days. The event represents a gradual process of normalization of relations between Syria and other Arab nations after almost 10 years of rupture due to the foreign-imposed terrorist war. We have more details in the following report by our correspondent Hisham Wanas.
The fair, organized by the Syrian Ministry of Economy and Foreign Trade in cooperation with the Jordan Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Syrian Chambers of Commerce, is taking place at the Expo Damascus Fairground, with more than 60 specialized Jordanian companies. The initiative seeks to increase the commercial exchange between the two neighboring nations and showcase service that Jordanian companies can provide to the process of recovery and reconstruction of war-torn Syria. This event is an important platform to increase joint work in benefit of the two neighboring nations' interests. These efforts were diminished due to the war, but they have regained strength in the last 2 years with the reopening of the border crossing between both countries, which helped to increase the flow of goods in both directions and consequently increase the volume of bilateral trade.
En ambos sentidos y por consiguiente el incrementar el volumen del intercambio comercial bilateral.
There are standing economic and trade relations between the two countries, which we seek to consolidate through this kind of event despite the difficult circumstances caused by the blockade and foreign interference. This shows that nothing can undermine the brotherly relations and economic and trade cooperation between Syria and Jordan. The participating companies are exhibiting their services and products in the fields of construction, energy, information technology and communications, banking services, insurance, tourism, transportation and logistical requirements in the field of health and education. As vital sectors, Damascus is grateful to be able to count on the contribution of specialized companies from the neighbors. In the midst of the Western economic blockade, that hampers official Syrian efforts to overcome the crisis.
que obstaculiza la gestión oficial siria encaminada a superar la crisis.
Through our participation in this event, we seek to offer the Syrian leadership and people our contribution to the reconstruction process of their country, and we do so with our company's contribution to the Syrian market of products needed to develop the renewable energy sector.
The unilateral economic sanctions imposed by Western countries not only hinder the reconstruction of the areas destroyed by terrorism, but also hamper the economic recovery of the country. So we appreciate the organization of this event that can help to break the blockade and reactivate the economic and commercial process in the country.
En la feria marcan presencia también unos 135 hombres de negocios.
Some 135 Jordanian businessmen are also present at the fair, taking advantage of the opportunity to exchange views, experience, and ideas with their Syrian counterparts on possible investment projects in sectors of common interest to both nations. This is one of numerous steps of rapprochement between the two countries, led by Jordan's recent decision to reopen its Jabal Nasser border crossing with Syria, and the subsequent bilateral ministerial meetings to strengthen trade, electricity, agriculture, and water cooperation between Damascus and its southern neighbor Amman.
Comercial, eléctrica, agraria, de recursos hídricos entre Damasco y su sureña vecina Amman. Hisham Wannous, teleSUR, Damasco, Syria.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.